Ancora testi riguardanti il mondo dell'agricoltura,
We have
ancora
more
pubblicazioni,
books
ancora libri
on
importanti e
agriculture,
naturalmente ancora
important
ospiti nello studio
publications,
della
and
EMA
more
Web TV.
guests at
Alla
our
mia sinistra,
web TV
professor Paolo de
studio.
Castro.
To my left, Professor
Come
Paolo
fare
de
a presentare
Castro.
Sébastien?
How can I
Quante cose possono
introduce
venire?
you?
Gli
How
autori
many
mi hanno
things
scritto,
should be said
naturalmente,
about
3
you?
mandati come ministro
3 mandates
dell'agricoltura
as
nel
Minister
nostro
of
paese,
Agriculture in
e
Italy,
3 legislature
and 3
consecutive come
consecutive
Tornato in Italia,
mandates
Università di Bologna.
in Europe, back to
fermo.
Italy,
So,
Bologna
solo
University,
attività
and
politica
political
ovviamente no.
activity,
va
no
bene.
more political
Alla mia
activity, we
destra,
stopped
Sébastien
it.
Abis.
To my
Abis, dico bene?
right, Sébastien
Mamma
Abis,
francese, papà
French
sardo.
mother,
Italiana.
Sardinian
Vabbè, io
father.
ho perché Abis è un nome, no, dai. Allora, parliamo di 2 libri importanti,
Let's
però
talk
prima devo
about two
dire che lui è
important books.
direttore
Let
generale
me
dal
first
2017
tell
del
you
Club
that
Mediterraneo,
is
che è
the
un centro
director
studi
of
formato da un
a
gruppo
study
di 90
center
aziende della
of
filiera
90
agroalimentare
companies
francese
in
che
the French
dialogano per
agri-food
trovare soluzioni
chain,
intelligenti ai
working
problemi del
together to
comparto.
find smart
Ricercatori
solutions
dell'IRIS, Istituto
to
Internazionale
agricultural
Strategique
problems. And
di
he's
Parigi,
also
poi insegna
from the
all'Università
International
Cattolica di Lille,
Strategic Affairs
all'Università
Institute.
Politecnica Mohammed
He
VI
works
di Rabat,
at
penso
the
sia in
Lille
Marocco, e poi è
University,
stato
at
funzionario
Rabat
anche
University in
del Centro
Morocco, and is a
Internazionale Studi
former
Agronomici Mediterranei
employee of
Avanzati.
the
Ma oggi
Advanced
perché abbiamo
Mediterranean
questi due
Studies
ospiti
Institute.
bravissimi? Perché parliamo di un
Okay,
libro importante. Vero
let's
Paolo?
welcome our
Dico
guests
Paolo,
to talk about a
professore,
very
Nutrire
important
il
book,
mondo. E voglio dire,
Feeding
è
the
un titolo.
World. It's
Lascio
an
la parola al
extremely
professore che può
impactful
dialogare
title.
con
So,
Sébastien.
Professor
Sì, no, diciamo che viviamo in
De
un'epoca di
Castro
grande
will
incertezza.
dialogue
Incertezza
with
dovuta
our guest.
certamente alle
We live in
guerre,
a
quello che
period of
stiamo vivendo davanti a
uncertainty
casa
due
nostra con
to
l'invasione russa
wars,
dell'Ucraina
the
e
Russian
poi dopo
invasion
con la
of
grande
Ukraine,
tematica
and
che si
then
è
of
aperta nel
course
Medio Oriente.
the Middle East
Ma in
conflict.
realtà queste sono le 2 guerre che diciamo ci colpiscono
So,
di più,
the
ma in questo
two
momento abbiamo
wars
almeno
that most
60
affect us,
proclami di guerra
but
nel
there are
mondo e
currently
questo crea instabilità e
60
l'instabilità non è
wars going
amica
on in the world, and
dell'agricoltura, della
that
produzione
generates
agricola. Tutto
instability,
questo ha creato
which doesn't go
una grande
well with
preoccupazione non
agriculture,
solo a livello
and
europeo, a livello
generates
globale. Basti
concerns
citare
at a
che
European,
il Partito Comunista
European and
Cinese
global
ha
level.
aperto
The
l'enclave
Chinese
che ogni 5 anni
Communist
fa sul
Party
futuro del pianeta,
opened
dove
the
il
session
titolo
on
era
the future
Una
of the
ciotola di
planet,
riso.
where the
Questo per
title
capire
was
quanto si
A Bowl
preoccupa
of
il
Rice,
mondo della
just to give you an
disponibilità di
idea
cibo in
of
futuro.
how
In effetti il
concerned the
tema
whole
è
world is
sollevato
about
poi
food availability
Sébastien
in
in
the
questo
future.
libro affronta il
Sébastien,
tema della
in his
sicurezza
book,
alimentare,
deals
della
with
cura
the
del pianeta, della
problem of food
sostenibilità, eccetera.
safety,
Ma tutto parte da
taking
un
care of
grande
the
punto
planet and
interrogativo. Riusciremo
sustainability. But the
ad
main
avere il
question
cibo
is, are we going
sufficiente
to have enough
per una
food
popolazione che
for
cresce,
an increasing
cresce e arriverà, come
population?
dice Sébastien nel libro, a
It's
circa
going
10
to
miliardi di
reach
abitanti
10
nel
billion
pianeta, ma soprattutto a 10
inhabitants
miliardi
on the
con una
planet,
capacità
10
d'acquisto
billion
più elevata
people
di quella
with
che avevamo in passato. Quindi
increased purchasing
incominciano
power.
i cinesi, gli
In
indiani,
the
gli
past, the
indonesiani,
Chinese,
cominciano a
the
consumare
Indians, the
latte,
Indonesians
carne,
are going
prodotti
to
che chiedono uno
consume
sforzo d'agricoltura
milk, meat
straordinario, un
products
aumento di
that
produzione
require
straordinario.
increased
Ma le terre sono un
agricultural
numero dato,
production.
l'acqua
But of
è
course,
quella che è.
land is
Quindi
limited,
come
water
fare ad
supplies are
affrontare questo
limited.
grande
So how can we
capitolo
cope
della
with
sicurezza
this
alimentare?
major
Sébastien
issue
Abis in
of
questo
food
libro,
security?
quindi lascio a lui
Sébastien
soprattutto la parola
Abis
per
tells us
descrivere
something about
un
it
po'
in
i
his
contenuti,
books, so I'll hand it
fa
over to
capire
him to talk
quanto
about the
oggi nel
contents of the
mondo
book.
si giochi
So
intorno al
today
tema della
in the
sicurezza
world
alimentare.
there's very
D'altra
much at
parte siamo nella
stake
piena
on
attualità,
food
in questi giorni si
security.
sta tenendo il vertice
These
dei capi
days
di Stato di
there's
governo europeo a
the
Budapest e
European
ritorna sempre
Summit
questo
in
tema, la
Budapest.
grande preoccupazione
The
europea
issue
dell'arrivo
comes
di
back of the
Donald Trump
European
negli Stati Uniti,
concerns
quindi la
about
preoccupazione per i dazi,
Donald
e intorno
Trump
c'è
as
sempre il tema
US
dell'agricoltura,
President.
dell'agroalimentare.
So
Quindi
always,
questo libro ci
and of
aiuta
course,
a
the
capire quello che sta
underlying
succedendo e
agriculture
soprattutto ci aiuta
related
a mettere
problems.
insieme
So this
alcuni
book helps us
diciamo così, percorsi di
understand
futuro
some
che
future
in modo molto semplice, chiaro,
scenarios
Sébastien Abis
that in
scrive
a
in questo
very
libro
clear
e
way
ci fa capire
Sébastien
un po'
Abis presents
dove
to
stiamo
us,
andando.
and he tries to
Sébastien,
explain where we are
a lei la
going.
parola.
Sebastian,
Grazie,
over to
Paolo,
you. Thank you
come ha
very
detto
much, Paolo. As Paolo said, this is a very
perché
particular moment.
siamo in un momento un
This
po'
is a
particolare
particular
perché da un
moment
lato,
for us. Because on the one hand, we have to face a human challenge to feed the world. It's a unique moment. There are 8 billion people on the planet. There's never been as many people, 2 or 3 billion people more before 2070 or 80, and then the population will start decreasing. So we are heading towards an increase in human needs, and we should remember that while the world is changing, there are so many things changing as well. Eating is a reality, daily reality for everyone. And of course, we're talking about it this year, and we'll go back to it next year as well. This problem is not going to disappear. We never needed food as much as now. And agricultural production has never been more important. Here I'm talking about farmers. And this event in Bologna, this international exhibition, shows that the agricultural universe is enormous. It encompasses many activities, and it's looking at the future. It's an expanding future that is expressed by agriculture and farming activities, with the need to feed the population and produce in a more sustainable way. The Everest metaphor, we have to go through 3 steps. There is a security issue. This is going to be increasingly important, also in geopolitical terms, not only in health-related terms for people to be fed and be healthy. And then the sustainability issue is extremely complex. We need to produce more with much less. We need to reduce CO2 emissions. So the challenge is feeding the world. In terms of population, this need has never been more crucial. It's a giant challenge, and we need to pursue sustainability. There's an increased need to work together. We're talking about giant challenges. And the third element, never to be forgotten, is the world demand for health. Food is very much linked to health all over the planet. And during this century, people are not going to eat to fill their stomach, because food should provide nutrients, improving the quality of life and life expectancy and healthy longevity. It's a very broad challenge. Health and food have to go hand in hand. So it's geopolitical issues. We have to consider the increased customization of diets. Rather than feeding everyone, we want to feed the planet, and each and everyone should eat adequate products in a very individualized way. As mentioned by Paolo very rightly, we have to focus on this challenge together, and from a geopolitical point of view, we have to pursue that, because we have to be united. That's the only way to reach our goal. This is a very challenging endeavor. The subtitle is How to Climb the Everest by 2050. So what can I find in the book as reader? How did you develop it? I thought about this book as something providing motivation to farmers, because strategically they perform a very important job. All citizens, all consumers, everyone should understand that without farmers we're not going anywhere. It's our responsibility to respect and value farming. And this sector has to look at the future. Of course, we cannot keep producing like a century ago. We have to get rid of oil in agriculture and try and produce in a more innovative way by combining innovative and experimental solutions in our farming activities. I try to keep a clear strategic approach. You cannot climb the Everest without being prepared for it. Like, I'm going, come back tonight, the weather's nice. We have to get ready, to get equipped for that. And, coming down will be much harder than climbing. But it can be done if we are equipped for that. We are motivated, we work together, we're very inclusive, and we have a clear strategic approach. Enthusiasm will provide enough energy for us to make it, because if we're not convinced that we can do it, then we can go home tonight and say, well, we can do that, it's not possible. We have to go for it, or not only for ourselves, but for everyone. We keep talking about it. There's been a focus on sustainability. There's no backup plan. We only have one big planet. The whole world is going through a situation of instability. So Europe will be in trouble if the other half of the world will not be able to survive. Anything to add, Professor De Castro? Just one comment, as mentioned by Sébastien in his speech, that can lead us to think about the whole issue from a different viewpoint. We have to produce more with less. There is an English word explaining this concept, sustainable intensivization. This is a huge challenge. This is truly, just like climbing the Everest. We have to produce more by using less resources and producing in a more sustainable way. And there's a way to do that. We do. We have the answers. But we have to put all innovations into play that are made available to us by science and technology, the innovative machines, as we are here at the EMA International Exhibition. So producing with less chemicals, that's possible with precision farming. These are mechanical technologies allowing us to use chemicals in a more efficient way, saving 30 to 40% of the chemicals currently used in agriculture. But in order to do that, we need a project, we need an idea, and we need an institution, a supranational institution providing guidelines on which this future can be built. And we have genetic innovation. There's a huge scenario opening up with artificial intelligence and with the new RNA-based genetic techniques. We saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic. A vaccine was developed in record times, but we need to understand that when it comes to food security, which has a lot to do with climate change, our future is at stake. And so we have to close the huge gap, which is increasing. Over 1.5 billion people wake up in the morning and they're not sure you're going to be able to eat during the day. 800 million out of this 1.5 billion are starving. The other 800 million eat every now and then. So considering the geometrical growth of the population, increase of per capita income, which leads to a proportional increase in food demand in countries with increasing income, then we need that the large countries in the world, including Europe and the United States, that have the strongest agricultural policies in the Common Agricultural Policy, allocated 380 million euros. The farm bill in the US, they're allocating twice as much, especially right now with the ongoing changes in the United States. So we have to set something at the center of our the agenda. It's not just the final goal to be pursued, and that was a mistake that we highlighted in the previous commission. You have to cut use of chemicals by 50%, reducing emissions by 40%. But how can we do that? You cannot set a goal and then forget about it, just like Mr. Timmermans used to say. You have to tell me how I can do that. How can I reach this goal? And in the book, the author explains how to raise awareness about the importance of a strategy and resources as well. So how? I'd like to ask a question to both. You mentioned the ongoing conflicts in Middle East, Russia and Ukraine, but we have 60 outbreaks, warfare situations all over the world. We have to take that on board, and that's for the whole world to take that on board. We do have the instruments. The point is whether we want to use it or not. There are many different ways to face the problem together. Climate change. Europe was far-sighted enough to start a large debate, but Europe was left alone. So what can we tell our farmers? That Europe today contributes by 7% to the CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, and then there's an additional 92%. So, of course, we can put pressure to bear, we can question our production systems in order to go from 7 to 5, if that 92 remains unchanged, because it means that we're going to have unchanged climate change issues, but our industrial system will be put under pressure, same as happened in the automotive industry, partially corrected by the European Parliament when it came to agriculture. So we don't lack the places and platforms for consultation. We need to be aware that these issues cannot be solved separately from one another. We have to find the way for the world, the major economies, to understand that the time has come to work together. This awareness is growing, but the hope is, as Sébastien states in his book, we can take steps forward. Let's turn this hope into reality. What do you think? Well, yes, coexisting, on the planet. I have two comments. The first is that agriculture needs a long-term approach. It needs a visibility, predictability. So if we don't have the trust, if we're not consistent, if we don't have a chance to be consistent in our consumers' policies, that's very hard to be done. As Paolo said very rightly, that at European level, we're the strongest in the world in agriculture and food production. Since the beginning of the century, we have understood that we've thought that agriculture is no longer a strategic sector. It's like eating is not something that happens by chance. Eating incorrectly may be dangerous. So we've changed our minds in a very fundamental way. So we need to pursue sustainability, and in order to do so, we need to explain the protagonists of this sustainability that will be able to do without them. As Paolo rightly said, we have to do without them, without that, and without that other. And of course, climbing the Everest, the food Everest by 2050, as I say in my book, if we want to jump on the train of sustainability, we need to make people want to jump on the train, to stay on the train, and to stay on the train till the final destination. So we need to give people the trust and the belief in these transformations. This is from a European point of view. From an international point of view, there is a multipolar approach. Europe is no longer alone. We are right in many areas, but we are alone. Europe no longer has the power it used to have in the past. So there are large sections of the world that are not waiting for Europe to authorize them to do things when it comes to science, agronomy, innovation. So multipolarization and separate strategies all over the world. We're talking about sovereignty. We're talking about trying to be better than everybody else. We're talking about competitiveness, not all together. We're talking about competitiveness. It's economic warfare, the agricultural warfare waged by Russia. If we look at the Moscow narrative on certain topics, I do like metaphors. On the one hand, we have the Everest mountain. From a geopolitical viewpoint, we have entered the hippo era. The hippo is hard, is fierce, is fast, and international relations are extremely challenging. So we have to accelerate in many different ways, while the hippo practices the economic and strategic polygamy. So it's a polygamy that that is not hidden. We're doing everything with everyone. There's no longer a problem, and that brings about a change in Europe. We are experiencing a very difficult time in Europe. We're strong in many different ways, but sometimes we doubt that Europe plays an important role, that agriculture doesn't play a central role in Europe, whereas we should be increasingly working together and, challenge this international scenario. Europe is not on another planet. Well, our time is up, unfortunately. Do you have an additional comment, Professor de Castro? Just a final comment on the fact that Europe always wants to come first. We have to set the guidelines, the Green Deal, the, plant chemicals, etc. But as a matter of fact, over the last 15 to 20 years, the world has changed. Europe is no longer as central as it used to be in international trade, as it used to be in the past. So when we invent European rules like the carbon adjustment mechanism, and we apply customs duties on the ones that don't comply with our criteria on deforestation, for instance, while 30 to 40 years ago the world would have responded like Europe accounts for 80% of world trade. Without Europe, we can't go anywhere. Now, people from Brazil say, well, if you don't want my palm oil, I'll sell it to somebody else. If you don't like soybean, the way we produce it, I'll sell it to China. So Europe can no longer impose a global strategy. It has to be shared, and sharing is much more demanding, more challenging. There's a lot of multilateral work to be done, especially our European institutions have to understand that before imposing the rules in Europe, they have to share and work out the rules together and never leave anyone behind. So Edagricole publishes, and another book by Sébastien, another important book on the wheat geopolitics, a vital product for world food security. So, wheat, how about it? The wheat is the same as talking about the Everest. We're talking about 50% of the food consumed globally. 50% of farmland all over the world produce cereals. Rather than corn and rice, wheat has a peculiarity. Wheat consumption
la
is
produzione
increasing
non sta
globally.
aumentando come prima.
Production is no longer
adesso,
increasing as it used to be.
un anno su due,
So 1 year
la
out of
domanda di
2,
grano
the
supera
wheat
la produzione.
demand is higher than
significa
production.
che dobbiamo
So what
tenere
does it
conto
mean?
attraverso il
It
grano
means
questa
that we have
geopolitica
to
che più o meno abbiamo
look at
una ventina
geopolitics.
di paesi a livello
We
mondiale
have some 20
che fanno
countries
abbastanza produzione
globally that
per fare un po' di
produce
esportazione per il
enough
resto del mondo.
to export
Mentre
some to the rest of the world,
150 paesi a
whereas
livello mondiale
150
producono grano,
countries in the world
ma sono
produce
anche
wheat,
importatori di
but they
grano.
have to import it as
E
well.
ogni
They don't
anno
produce enough.
aumentano
And every
l'importo
year,
di grano,
the
perché
amount they
problemi di,
import
scarsità
increases
dell'acqua,
because there's
problemi
water shortage,
climatici, problemi
climate change,
geopolitici, crescita della
geopolitical
popolazione,
problems,
eccetera.
population
E che dobbiamo
growth.
capire che a livello mondiale,
So we
sia
need
in
to
Asia, in
understand
Africa, sul livello
that
del bacino mediterraneo,
in
ovviamente,
Asia, in Africa,
se non
and the
c'è il grano
Mediterranean
sul tavolo,
basin,
non
if
c'è
there's
nient'altro.
no wheat on
Quindi
the
primo il
table,
grano,
there's nothing
pane,
else.
pasta,
So bread, pasta,
semoline,
semolina,
eccetera,
etc. And then, of course,
il resto. Quindi questo è centrale.
everything
E
else
a livello del
comes
grano,
after that. So
perché
wheat plays
c'è
a central
una
role.
geopolitica che adesso fa un po' l'illustrazione dell'Everest e dell'ippopotamo in cui ho
Geopolitics
parlato,
is
è che
very
il primo
important,
esportatore di grano a livello
and the
mondiale è la Russia,
first
che fa un
wheat
terzo dell'esporto mondiale.
exporter
Quindi
in the
Cremlino
world is
adesso si può
Russia.
spiegare a un
So
pezzo
from the
del pianeta,
Kremlin,
se
they
non siete
can
con
explain
noi,
to the rest of the planet the following:
un
if
po'
we're
più di
not with
fame a
us,
casa
you're
la
against
mandiamo.
us, and we're not going to export wheat to your country. So conclusions, how can we wrap it up? Read Sébastien Abis's books, buy them and read them. Thank you very much, Professor Paolo de Castro. Thank you to Sébastien Abis, our guests. At this session, I'd like to thank Edagricole Publishers for providing such insightful publications and books. You know, this is an evolving area, and we should change our mindsets accordingly. Thank you very much.